so much. I greatly appreciate it. Did you want me to slip over to my slide deck, or are you going to be going next for me? There we go. Thank you. So welcome, everyone. I wanted to build off of what Trey had talked about and share some additional information about PROMA zones and opportunity zones and how they come together in the state of California. On the next slide, you'll see just a brief history on the PROMA zone initiative, which started in the prior Obama administration and continued through the Trump administration. So collectively, the White House and our federal partners awarded 22 PROMA zones across the country through 2014 through 2016. They're 10-year designations. For the urban PROMA zones, the designation agreements are between HUD and the lead organization. And for our rural and tribal PROMA zones, the designation agreement is between USDA and the lead organization. These are contiguous geographies that encompass one or more census tract and have a population less than 200,000 and had significant levels of poverty within these census tracts and had clear local support from the mayor's office and as potential lead organizations. On the next slide, you'll see a overview of, if you could advance to the next slide. Thank you, that Trey had shared with the map of the PROMA zones. You'll see the first round was Los Angeles. In the second round, we had Sacramento. And then in the third round, we had South Los Angeles along with San Diego. On the next slide, please. You'll see the key policy areas that Trey had also shared around creating jobs, increasing economic opportunity, improving educational opportunities, also a focus on reducing serious or violent crime and leveraging private capital. And that last policy domain will kind of tie in, as you'll see when we tie into opportunity zones. Next, please. So again, these were high need, high capacity communities that received additional federal PROMA zone support. So there could be increased opportunity for the residents to accelerate community revitalization. And that's the general theory of action for PROMA zones. Next. The 4 key benefits for PROMA zones included the engagement of 5 AmeriCorps Vistas annually that each of the PROMA zone lead agencies get to help support their initiative, a local federal staff person from either our San Francisco regional office or Los Angeles field office dedicated to each of the PROMA zones. In addition, preference for certain competitive programs from the federal government or technical assistance. And last, PROMA zone tax incentives if enacted by Congress. And that will lead into how opportunity zones came about. Next, please. So this is the complex nature of how we at HUD provide technical assistance to our PROMA zones within California. So it includes partnering with the city government, lead organizations, community partners, data partners, local nonprofits and community organizations around providing technical assistance, data, and providing grant reporting and other resources from our host of 13 federal partners that we as HUD staff help coordinate around these efforts. Next, please. So interestingly, these older policies and new presidents in PROMA zones and the current administration. So PROMA zones were, as you know, one of President Obama's signature place-based initiatives. PROMA zones wanted a strong voice in Washington to sustain the initiative and influence kind of emerging federal policy. So they formed a national coalition of PROMA zones, which the 4 California PROMA zones participate. And they continued to work with the current administration to continue the designations, continued efforts for federal partners, the Corporation for National Community Service, AmeriCorps Vistas that are aligned. So we've seen this continuation of support from our federal government for the PROMA zones into this administration and like will happen into the next administration. Next. So now I want to talk about opportunity zones and the tie-in from the federal government from opportunity zones to PROMA zones. Next, please. So as Trey had mentioned, the opportunity zones are also, like PROMA zones, low-income census tracts. They were nominated by governors, and they include both private investment that's happening through capital gains that are deployed through qualified opportunity funds, but also private investment that's leveraged or a public investment that's leveraged from both the federal government and an alignment of state and local resources. Next, please. So here's the map across the United States, and as Trey had mentioned, California leads the nation with 879 Opportunity Zone census tracts. Next. So these low-income communities are often the first to hit and the last to recover in times of recession, and especially during times of a pandemic is what we're facing. Some key statistics about these census tracts on a nationwide basis were that the median family incomes increased 17% over a 10-year period at the national level, but in these, incomes declined by 27%. The median family incomes in opportunity zones across the country declined in half of the opportunity zones, and poverty rates increased in more than half of them, and they also saw population declines. So a majority of these and a strong number of these opportunity census tracts are places of severe distress in our country and have not seen economic development and deployment of capital into their communities. Next, please. In California, the governor's office submitted and Treasury approved these census tracts. So you can look here and comparing the California Opportunity Zone census tracts to the general opportunity or census tracts across the state. And so you can see across these key demographic and data indicators the high need for these census tracts across the state in both poverty rates, bachelor degrees, adults not working, housing vacancy, and rent burdens. Next, please. The role of HUD and the federal government with opportunity zones has been focused on the White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council that is working on providing guidance, coordination, and measurement for what is happening in the opportunity zone ecosystem. HUD's role and our HUD staff role throughout the country is working on coordinating federal programs and investments, leading local efforts to attract private capital, and collecting data about assessing the effectiveness of investments. Next. So this information that we collect and share is provided on our opportunityzones.gov website, where there's a section for local leaders such as yourself to get resources that I'll share a few of them on the next slide. So as you may know, the regulations were only recently published this year, in January 13th. They became effective March 13th. There were some correcting amendments that were published in April of this year that were retroactive to the beginning of this year. So we're talking about some federal regulations that are most recently published during this calendar year. Next. A key document that the federal government prepared was an impact of the opportunity zone assessment of what is happening in the marketplace. So through the end of 2019, over $75 billion in private capital had been raised by qualified opportunity funds, of which $52 billion, or about 70% of this capital, is considered new investment that would not have been raised, but not for the opportunity zone incentive. This private capital and equity raise has helped opportunity zone businesses grow by an estimated 29% relative to businesses in eligible communities that did not receive the designation. And with that amount of capital, it's estimated that over 1 million people could be lifted out of poverty and decreasing poverty by 11%. At the end of 2018, there was an estimate that there was around 1,500 qualified opportunity funds that existed. And the Council of Economic Advisors estimated that over 5,500 qualified opportunity funds existed through the end of 2019. And 12 months into this year now, we imagine that numbers to be significantly higher. Next. So for a distribution of how the funds are investing, one of the strong partners we have in California is Novogradac that reports on a certain percentage of the funds. You can see here that a large percentage of funds have been in residential, commercial properties, hospitality, and renewable. But what we're seeing is a growing investment and amount into operating businesses. And these opportunity funds are investing both in multiple cities nationwide, single cities regionally, and across multi-states as well. Next. Interestingly, in their recent reports, they've shown that a large percentage of the equity from qualified opportunity funds is being invested in California. So this gives you an indication of the funds that they track and where the investments are occurring. Next, please. So HUD has provided technical assistance to communities, and we produced two key toolkits: an Opportunity Zone Toolkit Volume 1, which is a roadmap to planning for economic development within opportunity zones, and our second toolkit, which is a guide to local best practices and case studies. Next. On the Opportunity Zone Toolkit Volume 2, we include tips, resources, and examples of best practices throughout the country in urban, tribal, and rural communities, and the primary audience is for local economic development officials, and we cover some key policy areas as well as some call-out boxes for some resources and community spotlights. Next. Some of these resources include, we've included over 30 Opportunity Zone resources shared in the toolkit, and we have over 30 community spotlights shared from 20 different states, including DC. And you can see an example of two call-out boxes here. Next. In addition, we share out examples of how, as Trey had mentioned, how communities have leveraged federal funding for their Opportunity Zone designations. Here are just two examples in Pennsylvania and Illinois, and I'm going to share some examples in California next. In addition to the Opportunity Zones Toolkit Best Practices Guide, HUD and our team members partnered with the White House Opportunity Revitalization Council to prepare a best practices report that's both forward-looking and backward-looking to assess the current state of the Opportunity Zone market. There are additional resources and best practices examples throughout this guide as well. Next. To date, through yesterday, 2020, December 8th, 2020, 20 federal agencies have aligned 340 federal grants and programs to offer Opportunity Zone benefits. This includes 291 unique grants, many of which have been released over multiple years, so more than 291 releases of grants. 23 are currently open. Most of the grants are on grants.gov, which is our federal government system for tracking grants, and you can search for them with a new Opportunity Zone benefits category. HUD offers a grant certification form to fill out. In addition, there are 49 programs as well that offer specific benefits for Opportunity Zones. And annually, this equates to over $16 billion in federal funding that could be aligned to California's Opportunity Zones. Next. I wanted to share that on a monthly basis on the opportunityzones.gov website, we produce a detailed report of all these federal grants and programs. So on the next slide, you'll see an example of the page from the Department of Agriculture and just an example of two of their grants that highlights when the grant is open, if it's closed, some information, a description about it, and the action completed to show the alignment of the resources. This is an example of a federal grant from the Conservation Innovation Grant, as well as disaster relief funds for community facilities from the Department of Agriculture. Next. I want to give you a couple examples of federal grants that were also awarded in California that offered Opportunity Zone benefits. So from our partners at the Health and Human Services, in Oakland, Main Street Launch received an $800,000 Community Economic Development Grant to capitalize on the Oakland Job Fund to provide low-interest loans to create and expand restaurants within 7 Opportunity Zones in Oakland. In addition, HUD has awarded $35 million in our Choice Neighborhoods Implementation Grant to the Housing Authority of the City of Los Angeles for the purpose of revitalizing the Jordan Downs public housing site, and that is also located in an Opportunity Zone. Next. In addition, our federal partners at the Department of Transportation recently awarded a 9.9 approximately Port Infrastructure Development Grant to help reduce delays and accidents at the Port of Los Angeles. Again, this project is located in an Opportunity Zone. Next. In addition, our partners at the U.S. Department of Education recently released their Teacher School Leader Incentive Program and their Teacher Quality Partnership Program. Both of these grants and all of the grants they awarded will take place in Opportunity Zones, including in California, several of the grant awards. Next. So here's just a list, for example, of the 26 different grants that have offered Opportunity Zone benefits at HUD. You can see it's a wide list of grants, and many of these have been offered over the course of a couple years with continuing Opportunity Zone benefits. Next. So HUD offers through our NOFA process this list of grants, and in this example, you can see we can award up to 2 points for a preference for opportunity zones that requires a certification. On the next slide, you'll see an example of that certification form that's required for the grant to get so that HUD can collect certain grant information. Next. HUD is currently offering and partnering with the White House on a series of webinars to bolster growth and opportunity zones and how to leverage public and private resources. We've conducted our first 2 webinars, and those recordings will be posted this Friday, and I'll be sure to share that out with the team at GO-Biz. Our next webinars next week is talking about how to develop your OZ action plan to build or strengthen your local OZ ecosystem. Next. So many of you are probably wondering where we are with opportunity zones, and especially with the president-elect and the administration. So part of the president-elect's plan and transition plan is to continue and support opportunity zones with a focus on incentivizing qualified funds to partner with local community-based organizations and nonprofits, to make sure that the opportunity zone benefits received and are reviewed by Treasury to ensure they flow to the community, and to have some transparency in reporting. And since this has been bipartisan support for opportunity zones, we've seen several different recent bills through Congress that support efforts for bipartisan reporting. You can see here, and just stay tuned as we go through the next Congress to see how these go. But you can see it's just bipartisan support for continuing to show support for opportunity zones, but also on reporting. Next. Just a couple more slides here. This is a national map of the PROMA zones in addition to their opportunity zones. And I'll follow that by the next slide, which is just a deeper dive into how California's 4 PROMA zones have eligible census tracts that were for opportunity zones that they also had designated. And you can see here the 4 California PROMA zones and how many of their census tracts were designated as opportunity zones, which was the very tax benefit that PROMA zones were anticipating when it was launched as one of the incentives. And with that, I thank you so much, Trey, and turn it back to you.